Lobbyists are a lot like lawyers. Everyone likes to hate on them and make fun of them until they need one, and then they're the first person you want to call. And you will feel the same about lobbyists once you get into politics. Lobbyists are portrayed in a very evil way, and I'm not saying that they don't often do what they're portrayed on television to do. So we're going to talk about that so we can protect you from lobbyists that you need to be watchful of. But they do serve a very important role in democracy, and you will come to depend on them in your role as a politician. So let's break down why that is and what you need to know about lobbyists in today's class. Okay, so first of all, when someone runs for office, they're not exactly necessarily qualified to do or to make the decisions they're elected to make, right? So a politician is voted in on a popularity contest. And once they get into office, they are tasked with making decisions that will impact entire industries or hundreds of thousands, millions of people at a time. So imagine how frightening it would be when you have no experience about the subject matter you're making these very important decisions about. Enter lobbyists. So lobbyists are individuals that have an expertise in a certain industry, area, economy, whatever, a certain product, let's say. They might represent industries. So they have huge expertise on these things, and their jobs are to educate politicians, kind of like crash courses, or filling them in on what they need to know, how a proposed change might impact a certain sector, so that you can make better qualified or better educated decisions on your watch. So really, they do serve a very important function, and you as a politician will grow to love them because they keep you from looking stupid. At the end of the day, that's what a lobbyist does. They keep a politician from looking stupid by giving them all the information they need to make a very informed decision, to teach them the language they need to know when they're talking to certain people from certain sectors, so that, it helps the politician get respect, and again, more importantly, not look stupid. So you'll love lobbyists because they'll keep you from looking stupid. Here's why you're going to hate them, is because, they're always giving you one side of the story, right? So they will represent how a certain legislation, let's say, will impact their clients, right? And then they'll kind of, sell the information as though that's an industry-wide fact, when, the reality is usually a lobbyist is working for the Goliath in the room. And what is good for the Goliath isn't necessarily good for the small mom and pop shop that's in that same sector. But they won't tell a politician that. So they're going to act like they're giving the politician every facet of information, or, every angle of a situation, when in fact they're only going to present the information in a way that leads to an answer that benefits, again, the big Goliath client, usually at the expense of the little guy that can't themselves afford a lobbyist. So on that end, lobbyists are fantastic as long as you understand they're serving the agenda of the people that are paying them. So now it's up to you to do your due diligence to say, okay, then let me find the lobbyists for whoever, is going to have a negative experience because of this decision I'm making. And the problem is that the people that normally would disagree with the advice the lobbyist is giving you can't afford their own lobbyists. So if you really want to do due diligence, which you should be doing, is reaching out to the small mom and pop shops that are being affected by a legislation you're trying to pass, for example, and let them know what you were informed from the lobbyist, so that they can give you the other facets that maybe the lobbyist didn't give you, so that you can understand, okay, the lobbyist, according to this Goliath, wants this to happen, but if I do this, all the small mom and pop shops, this is what's going to happen to them, and they left that part out of the conversation. And you're going to have to take it upon yourself to do that due diligence, because lobbyists are so sly and little mom and pop shops aren't. So a lot of the times the decisions are being made in the back room before the small mom and pop shops even know there's a discussion or a decision being made. So a lot of the times the pushback you'll get from the public once you advocate for a decision that the lobbyists are going to tell you is a great decision, you're going to get after the fact when it's too late and you've already done the damage. So, for example, there's a lot of industries that are being monopolized, and monopolization is also another problem in Canada. And that has all happened because lobbyists have convinced politicians to move in a certain direction that, again, served the Goliath and killed the mom and pop industries. And the politicians in question didn't do their due diligence or couldn't care less. Some of them, held the public feedback. We want to hear what you think in the industry, and they invite all the small players who scream, moan, and say, we can't do this, we can't afford these changes, yada yada. You make them anyways because the Goliath, that is the big player, told you should, and now all of a sudden monopolization has taken over, or even worse, monopsonization, because often that happens from another country. And we don't understand that other countries are co-opting our industries because lobbyists have made it sound good when they go to visit the politicians that are going to make the decisions that lead us in that direction. And that's the part where lobbyists then get hated, right? Because they're working for the richest guy in the room and they're putting everybody else at a disadvantage. And we're leaving it up to politicians to do due diligence when we know that the majority of politicians don't. And sometimes, lobbyists can be very charismatic people and they can be convincing. So especially when they're, representing a really big organization that can often be very helpful to the government in many ways, or creates many, many jobs. So the government's very careful not to upset them too much because we need them, right? Our economy needs these big organizations, and therefore they wield a lot of power in the back rooms. And here's the other thing. It's sometimes lobbyists are not employed by politicians, but they're actually hired by political staffers, and that's where things really get convoluted. Now, this is where democracy really gets usurped, and that's the power of political staffers. So, for example, a mayor will come and go, city councilors will come and go, MPs and MPPs, they all come and go, and yet the garbage is collected on time. In between elections, the mail's still delivered, right? Things are still running, welfare checks are still being printed. So the government runs with or without politicians. As a matter of fact, politicians have very little to do with the day-to-day running of society. It's actually city staff or provincial staffers that do all the actual governing, okay? Your elected officials are making the highest level decisions. That's about all that they do, is they discuss the highest level decisions. And often their in-between decisions are made on the recommendation of staff. So what you will often see is, let's use city councilors because that's where this is really evident, okay, where we really see this stuff happening, but it happens everywhere. So city council will be tasked on making a decision, but they're not quite sure because they don't have enough information to make a good decision. So they will bring a report to the staff. So they will order their staff, council will, to do a report on whatever the subject is that they have to make a decision on. Now, technically, city staff is supposed to make a report that includes all pertinent information, all sides of the story. They're supposed to provide a holistic, complete report to these politicians to read over so that they can debate and then decide accordingly. The problem is it's rare that staff does that. Usually, because staff have been there a hell of a lot longer than these politicians, so you'll have staffers there 15, 20 years where a politician only lasts 4, right? So they don't hold politicians in a very high regard because staffers believe that they're the ones that are actually doing the governing, okay, and the working of the thing. So what they will do is they will present a report, much like a lobbyist does, that is very one-sided. So they're going to present a report that leads city councilors in a certain direction. And when they do that, it's actually not really honest because they're not giving the politicians all the pertinent information. It's like they're talking to a toddler as to why you should eat spinach. That's how they kind of treat politicians, where you tell them just what they need to know in order to get them to make the decision you want. And because this is so prolific, staffers, this is notorious. Like politicians know this, and people in politics know that, city staff or provincial staff will act in a manner that, in my opinion, that is not very integral when you do that. Because a city staffer is, again, looking at things from what is the most expedient through their lens, not necessarily what is right. And what is right, is when you take all the information into account. So let's give you an example of how this can really, hurt you in the long run if you're not paying attention to these little slick maneuvers, lobbyists and city staffers that are acting like lobbyists or taking information from lobbyists, making these reports, how it might impact you as a politician. There was a city that was looking at converting some lands because they wanted to sell some lands to raise revenue. They wanted to develop an industrial corridor, and therefore there was a whole swath of area that had to be expropriated. And most of it was just brownfields, so it didn't matter and nobody cared. But there was one property, it was one family farm, it was a century farm, and nobody knew that there was an old lady that was living on there. She had inherited that farm from their great-grandfather, so she's maintaining an old family tradition and was very well known in town. She's like a town treasure, and her property, unfortunately, got lumped in with all of these properties that were being expropriated. When council was making the decision whether or not to expropriate those properties, they asked for a report on what those properties were and anybody that might be affected negatively, and they just asked for all the information. And the report they got back withheld a lot of historical information about this one family farm. And what they used was language like most of the properties are brownfields, right? Most. And no city councillor thought to say, well, what do you mean most? What were the other ones, right? They just say, oh, most are brownfields. Okay, we're fine. No one's going to care. Let's make the sale and that's it. So the city council voted to expropriate all these properties. And this one family farm got implicated. And this lady did not want to sell her farm. And not only that, but the city had been trying to take this farm many councils before this. So maybe 4 or 5 councils before, there was already a failed attempt at expropriating this property that the current city councillors didn't know about. And it was quite a contentious thing. So what happened was this poor old lady got a nasty letter in the mail, and apparently some city staffers were intimidating her. They were parking outside her thing. They were telling her she had to move. They were being jerks to her. And now she gets this formal letter in the mail saying, we're taking your farm, get out. When, this woman's probably going to die in a couple of years. They could have just sweat her out, and then bought it off the estate. But no, they had to make it a really big deal. So what happened? Well, this lady gave it to somebody, the letter to somebody who then published it in the news, and then all these citizens got together to fight the city taking this old lady's farm, and those councillors were made to look like the devil. The devil. One of those councillors ended up realizing that this big thing happened because that information was left out of the report. So when they went back to city council, this guy was a little bit pissed. And he said, hey, how come the report never mentioned that there was a family farm? It said that, they were all brownfields. And the response was, well, we didn't say they were all brownfields. We said they were mostly brownfields. Okay, then shouldn't you have said there's one farm in particular that is going to be contested? It's a 100-year-old family farm with an old lady living on it all by herself, and we're going to rip it out from under her. Didn't you think you should include that in the report? And they shrugged. But when they were done shrugging, you know what they did? They reported this city councillor to the integrity commissioner, saying he criticized staff publicly, he was being abusive to staff because he criticized their work, yada yada, and this politician went through an integrity commissioner complaint, which is not fun to go through that, because he criticized city staff for something they actually did. Like, this isn't like he made stuff up. They really did do this. And yet he's the guy that got in trouble for finding out. And what's worse, so now the public goes after every city councilor that voted yes to that expropriation. The public went after. So that same city councilor, because now he's in trouble anyway, so now he's gonna, go. So he became this lady's biggest hero. And behind the scenes, this guy was working to help this lady save her farm, because he was so furious that city staff led him to make a decision like this. So this guy worked behind the scenes, one thing after another. Anyway, this farm was saved. The city decided to back away and leave her alone after a huge public pushback. And the city councilor with the integrity commissioner report that I told you about, this guy, nobody knew the work behind the scenes that he was doing to help save this farm, because he did it quietly, which was stupid, because I had told him, make sure people know what you're doing, because unless people know, no one's going to know. And he said, well, no, because word will get around. No, it won't. Unless people are seeing you fighting in the public, don't trust that even the family will say, this counselor is the one that actually helped us, right? Because this guy originally voted yes to the expropriation and hated himself for it. So now he's trying to, fix the mistake. So in the end, the farm was saved. Some time goes by, and now he's up for re-election. And what gets brought up? These are the city councilors that voted to take that old lady's farm, and his name is on the list. The fact that he saved the farm after all the work he did, the fact that he fought city council staff or whatever, all that went under the rug. The only thing people remembered, that he originally voted to expropriate that old lady's farm. And every good deed he did after that was forgotten. All that because of what councilors did. All because of what city staff did. And then the worst part is, so not only is this guy villainized for his original yes vote that wasn't his fault, okay, and all the stuff he did to save the farm after was completely ignored, right? When they go up for re-election, everybody would say, and not only that, he's had an integrity commissioner complaint against him. Yeah, because he was fighting for the good guy, right? And city staff don't like getting criticized. And every time you criticize them, they go running to the integrity commissioner. So he wasn't under investigation because he did something wrong, right? That was city staff retaliating because they were pissed that a councilor dared disagree with their report. That's the kind of shit you're going to face when you're in office. So in that situation, listening to the experts, like the lobbyists that inform city staff and city staff that's pushing city council to do their bidding without actually helping them make an informed decision, is a sort of trap that you're going to fall into, and it's hard to see that you're falling into it. So you have to understand that don't necessarily believe the first person that comes to see you on a subject. As a matter of fact, anytime, because, lobbyists are really good at hiding, especially behind city staffers, right? So, for example, if it's a waste management, decision, the lobbyists will go speak to the people in waste management, convince them so that they convince the city councilor or whoever the politicians are making a certain decision, and now they can go around integrity commissioner rules, because lobbyists are governed by the lobbyist registrar. And there are very strict rules about how a lobbyist should behave, because the government's trying to mitigate, the problems like this that come up. So and there's a million registrars. So you've got every city has lobbyists, province has lobbyists, and then federally there are lobbyists too. So it depends on, what industry they're serving and how far their reach are. So you have to register as a lobbyist to say, this is what I do, this is who I represent, this is my expertise, and you have to register. Once you're registered as a lobbyist, you have to report, technically. I think they give you 1,100 hours. Those rules are changing now. You're allowed to lobby 1,100 hours before you have to report anything. So, who's actually counting? Who's looking at your schedule, right? To say when was that 1,100 hours up? But technically, After 1,100 hours of lobbying, or whatever the number is at the time you listen to this, because like I said, it's in the middle of changing, you need to report. And there's this little form we have to fill out, because I'm a registered lobbyist. We have to log in and fill out this form that says, on Tuesday, I met with MPP so-and-so. This is what I asked. They answered me back. They didn't answer me back. And it's all there, so that should it ever come up later that this lobbyist was, influencing a politician to make a bad decision, or if the politician accuses you of that, then you can say, no, I reported it. Look, on Tuesday thing, I was there. I talked to him. I never hid anything. This is what I did. And it protects the lobbyist too by keeping these accurate reports. So everything's governed by the integrity commissioner, and there's rules around, like, for example, a lot of my friends are politicians, but I'm a registered lobbyist, and that makes things pretty complicated for us socially. So, for example, my wedding, whichever elected official I invite, I need to inform the integrity commissioner that they're invited to my wedding. I need to let them know how much the dinner is that I'm feeding them, whether they've given me a gift. I've actually, to make it easier, I've asked my politician friends not to give me a gift, because I don't want to have to, they bought me a bottle of wine and a platter. I don't want to have to report all that shit to the integrity commissioner. I would rather they just not buy me anything. And when it comes to going out, so for example, I have a girlfriend who's an elected official. She and I never cross paths professionally. There's never an issue that I need her for. And yet, because she's an elected official and I'm a registered lobbyist, just to cover our ass, anytime we go out to dinner, like, we can't buy each other dinner. Even like, it's your birthday, let me take you out for dinner, we can't. Or we don't. We don't want to bother with the bullshit. So what we always have to do is ask for separate bills, and we never pay cash. Because if 5 years from now we're under an integrity commissioner investigation, we want to be able to say, yes, I had dinner with that elected official, and it was social, we're girlfriends, and we each paid our own way, and here's the debit receipt to show that I paid for my own dinner. I bought my own coffee. You can't even buy them a coffee. Like, it's very, very strict. And again, for good reason, right? So lobbyist rules exist for a reason, but they're very easy to circumvent. Many lobbyists do. And like I said, a lot of lobbyists will work indirectly by not lobbying the actual politician, but by lobbying a department and being sneaky that way, because you don't necessarily have to report that, because you're not speaking to an elected official at that point. It's just a city staffer, right? So there's a lot of ways around the lobbyist registrar rules, which is why they keep updating them, because they're trying to, fix the issues that are coming from the lobbyist cohort, understanding, though, that lobbyists are very important. So, yeah, they cause problems, like in the situation with that expropriation. When things are not integral, or they're using the system to their advantage unfairly, it can be very problematic. However, they are incredibly important, because when you as an elected official are making a legislation decision around in an area you have zero expertise and no knowledge of, a literal disaster can ensue. So lobbyists are there to help you at the end of the day. They're there to help you from from looking stupid. They're there to help you make an informed decision. You just have to be hyper aware that everybody, not just lobbyists, everybody coming to see you has an agenda. And don't assume that you're being given all the information by any person, including city staffers, especially city staffers. There is a huge contention between politicians and staffers. You need to know this going in. So as a city councilor, they're going to say, city staff is there to support you. No, that is not the reality of the situation. That's what's supposed to happen. City staffers all feel like they know better than you. They feel like they're going to be there long after you're gone. And they feel like you should just shut up, do what they tell you, because they were there before you. So, and remember again, they themselves are very clouded, because the arrogance that comes with I've been here longer than them and I'll be here after they're gone, that arrogance really impacts how they deliver information to you. So a city staffer is always going to treat you like a petulant teenager and only ever give you what they want you to know in the way they want you to know it. So you will always, always, always have to do your own due diligence so that you don't get caught up in a disaster like that farm expropriation. So that's what you need to know about lobbyists.